If I didn't think we could win the Super Bowl, I wouldn't be playing. I'm not trying to coast into irrelevance. There were some dark days, heartbreak and sadness. There wasn't a lot of wins to celebrate, but there's some beauty to be found in the void. Being counted out, an afterthought, an underdog has been kind of my path.
I've had a chip on my shoulder ever since high school, junior college, Division I, being a backup, getting overlooked on draft day. 3 years as a backup.
We've got breaking news. Aaron Rodgers out for the season.
His career may very well be over.
It would be kind of unprecedented for a 40-year-old quarterback to come back off an Achilles injury and play at a high level. I don't think anyone's ever done that. How much personal motivation does that bring to you?
More now that you've mentioned that.
And Rodgers making his return tonight against the team he idolized as a child, the San Francisco 49ers, on Monday Night Football. And here to talk about it, CBS Sports HQ injury analyst Marty Jamarillo. Marty, we know what Rodgers has been through over the past year. As he gets set to return, what are you keeping an eye on tonight when he steps onto the field against the Niners?
Well, Jeremy, that last segment talking about the void, man, that chip is going to help him, going to take him a long way. So if you remember, it's been a full year since he had the Achilles rupture and the subsequent repair. He had that revolutionary procedure called a speed bridge procedure that allowed him to put weight on it sooner, range of motion, and strengthening and mobility a lot sooner. He was actually cleared at week 16, but the Jets weren't in contention, so they actually decided to let him rest. So he had a full year to get his mind and his body right. Now, do I have concerns? Of course. And I'm a Jets fan, but still, I have concerns because the data is clear. If you don't have a preseason, your potential for injury goes up regardless of position. You can make the argument that his years of experience and reps could help bypass the lack of the preseason, but I'm still concerned. I'll be watching for a number of things. His mobility, number one, particularly running, accelerating, and the essential drop back to push off, which is how the injury happened. It's that moment in time from the drop back to the push off. So I'll be looking at all those little things, compensatory patterns, confidence in the pocket, and confidence scrambling out as well. Fingers crossed. It's only had 4 downs last year. Let's try to get through a whole season. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, watching as an analyst and watching as a fan, obviously levels of concern on both sides of things, certainly for you and other Jets fans. On the other side of this matchup, let's turn to a couple other injuries that we want to keep an eye on here. Niners running back Christian McCaffrey says he expects to have the same workload as usual, despite the fact that he also missed most of training camp. He had calf and Achilles injury. He's been practicing all week. What's your level of concern here?
Well, early in the preseason, I was very concerned for him because once you have a calf strain, which is a slight tear, you can have a number of other complementary injuries like an Achilles tendonitis. So now he has both. So they were extremely conservative with him. With someone like Christian McCaffrey, you actually have to protect him from himself because he's going to go no matter what. So I think it's going to be a very close, a game time decision. I suspect he will go. If you have a prolonged calf tear that goes unwatched or unmanaged appropriately, it can lead to a more of an issue with the Achilles. So he has a little bit of both. So they'll be watching him very, very closely. And for pretty much a preeminent #1 draft pick across fantasy football, everyone will be watching very closely.
Yeah, and you just take a look at what he did last season in terms of those scrimmage yards, over 2,000, ranked first in the NFL in rush yards and 21 touchdowns. #1. All right, some injuries we had this week. Obviously, top of the list, Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua. He suffered a knee injury going down to catch a pass. Now, he had a knee injury during training camp related to the bursa sac in his right knee. Marty, what did you see? And if it is related to the injury he had in training camp, what could we be looking at here?
That's a great question. You know, my phone blew up on Puka because he was such an integral part of so many fantasy teams. And what is the status for next week is still up in the air. Here's what we know. He sustained a bursa rupture during the preseason. So the bursa sac, they're located throughout the body, and they're located in areas of high friction where tendons attach to bone. So when he landed directly on the knee in preseason, the swelling was so significant that it actually burst and created swelling throughout the joint, and they had to manage that properly because it takes very little swelling to give the knee a sense of instability. But he recovered well from that. Now, when I saw during the game when he landed on the same knee, you do have concerns that he re-injured that bursa sac, but there's also concerns that he may have injured possibly a ligament, possibly the meniscus, based on how he fell. So he's predisposed to any number of those. Now, they'll have multiple scans, MRI, X-rays, to look for the source of the inflammation, which kept him from going back in the second half. And we are hoping that it's only the bursa sac, which he can recover from fairly quickly.
Yeah, if it is the bursa sac, if that's what it is, what are we looking at in terms of a timeline here? 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah. If it's a bursa sac, 1 to 2 weeks will be on a week-to-week basis for sure. And the fact that he already recovered the first time, the second time's oftentimes it comes back very quickly.
All right. Dallas tight end Jake Ferguson has been diagnosed with a bone bruise and a sprained MCL in his left knee, but he may still play against the Saints in week 2. How could those injuries limit his output? And again, level of concern here with Ferguson as he tries to play through this.
A scary moment indeed. You know, it looked very much like almost the Jordan Love injury from Friday night in Brazil. The concern here was based on that torque in the angle, how the knee buckled inwards. The concern is always season-ending ACL, but he dodged a bullet, and fans and the team could have a sigh of relief. He was diagnosed only with an MCL tear and bone bruise. I say that because that always heals perfectly. In about 4 to 6 weeks, that ligament is very wide, very elastic, very long, protects the knee easily, and it heals almost 100% of the time without surgery. He also has a bone bruise, which adds to the pain because the MCL is a very painful injury. The bone bruise adds a little bit more to that. Now, Jalen Hurts had a very similar injury last season and wore a brace throughout most of the season to protect him from the bone bruise. So the team has him listed as week to week, but I always lie on the side of being conservative. Anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks, I expect him out. Pain is the guide, especially pain with running and cutting and changing of directions. If there's any lingering pain, the brace will help him a significant amount with the bone bruise.
All right, so we'll see what happens with Jake Ferguson, but as mentioned, our reports that he could try to play against the Saints this coming week. Cleveland tight end, another tight end injury to talk about. David Njoku exited their loss to the Cowboys with what the team fears might be a high ankle sprain. He has testing today to determine the extent of the injury, but he's going to miss at least a couple of weeks here, Marty. We've spoken about high ankle sprains before, so walk us through how this could go with Njoku.
Sure. Well, he'll be going through a number of scans, both X-ray and MRI, to see the extent of that tears. But let's talk about what the high ankle sprain is. Little show and tell, Jeremy. Right, the ligament is above the ankle joint, and it goes horizontally between the tibia and the fibula. And what that ligament does, it keeps those two bones from spreading. So when you're about to push off, if those bones spread, you lose all power, and it could be a very, very painful injury. Now, rehab here in recovery, it really is all over the map based on extent of the tear, but also the position the player plays. So, for example, Mahomes came back in only 8 days. Cooper Kupp was out 3 months. Well, Cooper Kupp had a procedure called the tightrope procedure that can help accelerate healing. Normally, we look at this as a 6 to 8 week process, but based on the extent, based on how quickly he recovers, possibly a pre-existing injury, he could be back as quickly as 2 weeks. But I think it's safe to say somewhere around 4 to 6 weeks, expect him to be out. Very painful injury.
And Njoku had 4 catches for 44 yards before sustaining the injury, 29 of those yards coming on the play where he was hurt. The Carolina Panthers, their news went from bad to worse today. After that tough loss to the Saints, they're now going to be without one of their best players for an extended period of time as Pro Bowl defensive lineman Derrick Brown suffered a potentially season-ending meniscus injury that will require surgery. What is it that will determine whether or not it is a season-ending injury, Marty?
Jeremy, great question. So it's still one big question mark for the Pro Bowler. He sustained a meniscus injury, and to remind viewers, the meniscus are the 2 C-shaped discs that sit on top of the tibia and provide a great deal of support as well as stability and shock absorption to the knee. Now, he can either be out 4 to 6 weeks or the full season. That cannot be determined until after the surgery begins. based on the type of tear, the size of the tear, and the location of the tear. If it's a traditional tear where they can just trim the edges and smooth it out, called a meniscectomy, that's the best news, which is 4 to 6 weeks. But because the meniscus has poor blood supply, if they find that the tear is towards the outer edges of that meniscus, well, that's where the good blood supply is, and they will attempt to repair it. That's a 6 to 8 month rehab. Short term could be very bad news for the Panthers, but long term, silver lining for Derrick, because it gives him long-term knee health. Very similar to J.J. McCarthy. They couldn't make that decision until after the procedure started, and he will be missing the season. So very similar there.
Yeah, and you see the schedule here. They've got the Chargers coming up next, and it is a huge loss. He played 60 of 66 defensive snaps before exiting Sunday's loss to the Saints. Thanks to our CBS Sports HQ injury analyst, Marty Jamarillo, breaking down some Week 1 injuries to discuss and looking ahead to what we've got on Monday Night Football. Other injuries of note, I just want to let you know about Roma Dunze getting an MRI on his knee. He was hurt on a blocking play on Sunday. Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison is said to have significant soreness in his ankle. Head coach Kevin O'Connell says they're going to be smart with that. Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore reportedly dealing with a minor hamstring injury. And Josh Allen says his left hand is fine after injuring it on a touchdown run Sunday, but also said, I'll wait for the doctors to tell me after we do further testing.